Item number 2, the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Following the pledge, we will stand for a brief moment of silence and reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to item number 3, public comment, 15-minute limit. I have 4 individuals signed up. 1 has indicated that they wish to speak. I am going to clarify that we will be opening the public hearing for item 5A3 later in the agenda. For public comment here, this is general public comment. So I'm going to ask for Jessica Telusty to give me some clarification here. Did you wish to speak during the public hearing or during the public comment?
I'll waive comment, actually.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 4, approval of the June 4, 2024 committee minutes. They were in your packet. Motion to approve would be in order. Motion by Supervisor,
I actually have a recommendation for a change.
Oh, go ahead.
Absolutely. So, in the discussion regarding, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a recommendation on, I can't specifically find it right now, but the motion to make an amendment there is an error in there. If anyone can help me find it really briefly here. We were discussing the motion from Plover. So it's in line item number 6. There was an action and a motion that was approved, so the motion was by Ritter, and second was by DeBrew, and then there was a motion for an amendment. Drebeck made that motion, but it was actually me that made the second, and not Supervisor Schoenborn.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. That's a clerical error that can be adjusted with the approval, so
Great.
That's fine.
Okay.
There's no requirement for there to be a motion to amend the minutes.
Okay.
We'll just approve them with that noted.
Great.
Okay.
I also have one more item, just for clarification, in agenda item number 7, on the vote. So on the action and the motion passes with a vote of 4 to 5. Is there a way to request that to be 5 to 4, or is it specifically 4 to 5?
I've never seen it recorded with the lesser number first. Okay. If there's no objection from the committee, it can be 5 to 4. Is there any objection to that? No? Okay. All right. 5 to 4 it is.
Yeah.
So with those 2 edits, we'll still move to approve the minutes. So with those 2 edits, motion to approve. Motion by Supervisor Kroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You vote to approve the minutes from May. I already forgot the date. Anyways, just on June 4th. Thank you.
Yep. All right, motion's been made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor, who is that? Drebeck. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to 5, operational functions by statute, ordinance, or resolution. A, public hearings, review possible actions and possible recommendations to the county board for its consideration. We have county zoning changes. We'll now proceed with the opening of the public hearing. Just ask that everybody that's joining us in person here, please mute your electronic devices. Anybody joining us electronically, please mute yourselves unless you are offering testimony. The Marathon County ERC is now meeting in public hearing on the location plan specifications of and purpose of the following projects. Just a note, 5A1 has been pulled, so we have 5A2, Tim Vreeland on behalf of Keith Ziemba, low-density residential to rural estate and general agriculture, town of Knowlton, and 5A3, Marathon County heavy industrial, or in the alternative, a specified solid waste or landfill gas designation specific to the landfill gas processing facility located on site, town of Ringgold. Members of the committee present are Supervisor Longenhahn, Supervisor Ritter, Supervisor Seatbelt, Supervisor Drebeck, Supervisor Kroll, Supervisor Schoenborn, and Tom Miller, our agricultural interest representative. I believe we also have Marilyn Bend, the Wisconsin Towns and Villages Association rep, joining us electronically, as well as Supervisor DeBrew. Did I miss anybody else, staff?
That's everybody.
Okay, very good. We also have staff to assist as needed. The establishment of the ERC is required by law for purposes of administration of county ordinances and land conservation programs. This committee must follow state laws and local ordinances as written. This committee cannot change or ignore any part of the ordinances or state laws, but must apply the laws as written. The purpose of this committee is to hear and decide on proposed ordinances and ordinance revisions, rezoning petitions, and provide direction on land conservation planning programs. The ERC will give a full and fair hearing to any person applying for a rezone petition. A taped recording is being made of the meeting, which will assist with preparation of written hearing minutes. The committee is interested in hearing all pertinent comments and questions. Each hearing will be opened by reading the public notice and allowing staff to present a staff report, including evidence from any on-site inspection. The applicant and anyone wishing to testify will be sworn in and allowed to give testimony. Witnesses will be called in the order of those first in favor, second opposed, and then third as interested may appear. The committee may ask questions of the zoning staff and applicant. It is necessary that we set a reasonable time limit on individual statements on the overall length of the hearing. To promote orally discussion, anyone wishing to present oral testimony or ask questions relating to the hearing should state your name and present your testimony or question so it becomes part of the official record. We request you avoid repetition. Once the committee has all the necessary facts, the chairman will close the hearing, allowing no further testimony, and the committee will deliberate and decide in front of the public whether the applicant has met the standards in the ordinance. No additional testimony from the public is allowed during the deliberation. However, the committee may question staff for purposes of clarification. After a decision is made, the committee will proceed to the next hearing. Many of the decisions made by the committee are a recommendation to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, who will take up the matter at a future county board meeting. Please contact staff for more information regarding this county board process. So we will now hear the application of 5A2. We have Tim Vreeland on behalf of Keith Ziemba, low density residential to rural estate and general agriculture in the town of Knowlton. And we'll start with our staff report. We'll swear Garrett in. Garrett, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Proceed, sir.
All right, this is for Keith Ziemba, petition to rezone land, staff report July 2nd, 2024 for the Environmental Resources Committee. The petitioner is Tim Vreeland, located at 6103 Dawn Street, Weston, Wisconsin, 54476. Property owners are Keith and Michelle Ziemba, located at 525 South Park Street, Belleville, Wisconsin, 53508. Area to be proposed to be rezoned is located just west of the intersection of Bird Lane and Old Highway 51. The petition of Tim Vreeland on behalf of Keith Ziemba to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone lands from LDR low density residential to RR rural residential and GA general agriculture shown on CSM 2076, CSM 2139 and part of the northeast quarter of the fractional northeast quarter of Section 5, Township 26 North, Range 7 East, Town of Knowlton. Area proposed to be rezoned to RR rural residential is described as Lot 1, and the area proposed to be rezoned to GA general agriculture is described as Lot 2 of the preliminary CSM parent parcel numbers as shown. The Town of Knowlton Town Board met on June 10th, 2024. Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee is meeting today, July 2nd, 2024 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. On June 10th, 2024, the Town of Knowlton Town Board recommended approval to Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. Staff recommendation: the rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan and as indicated by the town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors. Should the rezone be approved by the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, CPZ staff recommend that the town update its comprehensive plan to reflect the zoning change if applicable.
Questions for Garrett? This might be a better question for the associate from Vreeland that's joining us here, and I might have to ask him this question when we get to that part of the testimony. But do you know why they're taking it out of LDR? It's not often we see something go from LDR to the ag purpose. I'm just curious.
Yeah, because it looks like, based on the CSM that's shown on the screen here, LDR is a smaller district. It's district size 1 acre to 1.99. Now that they have created this the CSM that creates a lot that is 2 acres, they're able to move up into a larger zoning district, and that may have some advantages for them as far as different uses and size of structures and things like that.
Okay, yeah, I'll ask the person from Vreeland as well this question too, but thank you. Any other questions for Garrett? All right, thank you, sir. Moving on, anybody wishing to speak in favor of 5A2 on the agenda, please identify yourself at this time. I think we had, is it Dustin? What is his name?
Dustin Vreeland, yes.
Dustin, are you with us?
Me?
Oh, I think he might.
Yeah,
be
I'm
muted.
here.
Okay, Dustin, I got to swear you in quick. So can you state your name?
Dustin Vreeland?
Okay, Dustin, you raise your right hand, and do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay. Feel free to offer testimony, but I would just repeat the question that I had to Garrett just now. Do you know why it's going, or what the property owner's idea is behind going from LDR to the, like I said, the more ag-minded zoning district?
That's exactly what Garrett said. Just more advantages for possible future expansion. That was it.
Okay, that sounds good. Did you wish to offer anything else?
Nope, but I'm just here if you guys have any questions for me.
All right, any other questions from the committee? All right, thank you, Dustin.
Thank you.
All right, calling one more time. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. Oh, so, Bob, can you,
This is actually Keith Bimbo, the property owner.
just one second. I have a Bob here, and then we'll get to Keith, you said, right? Keith Ziemba, you're joining us?
Yeah, I am the property owner.
Okay, so I saw Bob first, so I'm gonna recognize him, but then I will get to you, Keith, okay? So,
Okay, sounds
state your
great.
name, sir.
Vito, I'm a neighbor to Keith.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, proceed.
And I'm a neighbor to Keith, and I'm in favor of doing exactly what he wants to do. Part of the field there too is in agriculture, and I am farming it. So I am using that part too for renting it out. So I'm all in favor of everything that he had said, so.
Okay, any questions for Bob? All right, thanks for coming. You're welcome. All right, so next up I had Keith. So Keith, if you'd raise your hand and, well, I guess state your name first, please.
Yep. Keith Zimba.
All right, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just we were combining. It was just to give a little history. It was 3 lots. We combined 2 smaller lots with the house to be able to kind of sell that off, but retain more of the property for agriculture was the purpose.
Sure. Okay. All right. Any questions for Keith? All right. Thank you for joining us today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Call one more time. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. All right. Seeing and hearing none. I'll call once. Anybody wishing to speak opposed to item 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. Okay. I'll call once. Anybody wishing to speak as interested for item 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. All right. If no one else wishes to testify for this application, I'm now declaring the public hearing on item 5A2 now closed. The committee will now deliberate on the application to apply the standards of the zoning ordinance. I think motion to approve here would be in order. Would anybody like to make that motion? Supervisor Seefeld?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion for the petition of Tim Vreeland on behalf of Keith Zimba to amend the General Code Ordinance of Marathon County, Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone land from LDR, low-density residential, to RR, rural estate, and to GA, general agriculture, as shown in the town of Knowlton, and to pass conclusions of law and forward it to the county board.
Motion is made. Is there a second?
Hey, just a second, Mr.
Oh.
Chair. So in the public hearing notice, the first part of it did say RR rural estate. It should be RR rural residential, and it says it later in the public hearing notice.
Right.
Just wanted to make sure that that was stated there.
Read it too fast.
So just to be clear though, Garrett, it's LDR to rural estate and general ag, right?
Nope, it would be rural, RR rural residential and general ag.
This agenda's wrong then. I'm guessing the notice is too then for the meeting.
So I'll pull the notice up here quick.
Okay.
So here's the notice.
So that
Yep.
also says.
Yep, it does say rural estate there, but down here, it does say rural residential.
If I could add something to it, but I think I have to be sworn in.
We'll do that just to be safe. I mean, I think this is a clarifying question, Chad, but we'll just say, we're reopening the public hearing. So state your name.
Chad Harvey?
All right, Chad, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right.
I was just going to say, given that the abbreviation RR is used, the rural estate, the only thing that's different on there is instead of residential, it says estate, and it clarifies it underneath the remainder saying lot. Let me bring it up here quick. I can't see the screen up there. It's the correct designation is following, or is in the lower half of the public hearing notice. I think we would be okay, and our corp counsel could pitch in if he agrees, but I think we should be okay.
Just give me 1 second here. So instead of, just to be clear for everything here, instead of rural estate, it's supposed to be rural residential, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, all right. So, yeah, my next question would be to the attorney, and again, we'll still say this is under the hearing too, so I'll swear you in real quick, Mike. So do you sort of tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, go ahead. Do you want to offer your thoughts?
Sure, Mr. Chair. In looking at the notice as well as the agenda, as Chad had indicated, it does indicate RR. I think my interpretation of estate would be it was a scrivener's error. It should be rural residential, but the RR does signal rural residential. The hearing notice also indicates rural residential separately, specifically about the area proposed to be rezoned. I think the public in reviewing this would be on notice that the request is to rezone to rural residential. So I am comfortable proceeding at this point. I also think if the committee has concerns, you could elect to issue a new notice and have this heard next month. But from a legal perspective, I think this error is corrected in the body of the public hearing notice.
What about the notice agenda for the meeting, though? Because on here it says rural estate.
It does, but it also has the RR designation, which refers to rural residential. And the agenda needs to give the public, have the public reasonably apprised of what's going to be discussed. Clearly, the agenda indicates there will be a zoning decision about LDR to RR and general agriculture. The body of the public hearing notice then gives further clarity to what's actually being requested. So I do think you're okay to proceed.
Okay. All right. I guess I should ask any questions for staff regarding that. All right. Thank you both. I'm closing the hearing. So we had a motion. I don't recall if we had a second. Oh, yes, Supervisor Ritter seconded. Okay, we had a motion by Seefeld, second by Ritter. Any further discussion? So with the advice of our attorney here, we're okay to proceed. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we will move on to 5A3, the Marathon County Heavy Industrial or in the alternative, a specified solid waste or landfill gas designation specific to the landfill gas processing facility located on site in the town of Ringgold. I think we're going to start with Corp Counsel Pernier. And since you're already sworn in, Mike, you can start whenever you're ready.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. as the committee will recall, this initially came before you last month. The adjournment out to this month did allow me to engage with counsel for the town on some potential alternatives here. I did want to give a little bit of history on the parcel that I don't know that we went into detail last time, but just to give the committee a flavor of this particular parcel. This is a parcel that the county has owned since the 1970s. In 1979, the county board elected through its power to zone its own property to zone this particular parcel as designated as landfill use. So it's designated as landfill. Under our existing Code of Ordinances, Chapter 17, there is no landfill designation. So updating the county zoning on this particular parcel, I think, is important no matter which way the committee goes. In hearing the comments from last month, I think, and in reviewing your packet, I think there are 2 letters indicating that the town of Ringgold did have a chance to consider the heavy industrial proposal and that they're opposed to that. I have had some drafts back and forth with Lee Taroney, counsel for the town, about the potential for creating a special zoning district for the parcel. There is a draft in your packet right now. The town has not had a chance to weigh in on that potential, but just to be clear, I think there are really 2 potential tracks for action for you today. You could elect to approve the idea of a heavy industrial zone and move that forward to the county board and zone this particular parcel into an existing district, which is heavy industrial. The other avenue is, I think, creating that special zoning district. Now, that would require some additional action. Couldn't be taken today. We'd have to move that out probably till August. It would include getting town input as far as the amendment of the zoning code to create that special zoning district and then zoning this parcel into that new district. Again, the town of Ringgold hasn't been able to weigh in on that concept at this point, although I think I can fairly characterize that they're more in favor of that idea than a heavy industrial designation. I think at this point, it would be up to the committee whether you want to, reopen the public hearing on the heavy industrial, take additional comments, receive those letters from the town, or direct staff on that track to pursue a draft of a special zoning district. Again, there's a draft in your packet, and what that would look like would be identifying the potential uses for this parcel, identifying that as a special zoning district, creating that district in our code so that we don't have the issue that we had from the 1979 action of the county board, where the board zoned this parcel as landfill, but then our existing zoning code does not define what landfill means, what uses are permitted, et cetera. So we would put that in the code for future generations. I think that decision is up to this committee. If you directed staff to pursue that, that special use district, we would go back to finalizing a draft, getting comments from towns. I would assume your direction would be to get comments from the town of Ringgold as well, which we have been engaged in, but would continue to do. There's a lot more as far as history of this particular parcel if you want that history, but I just wanted to lay out what I think are the 2 tracks here, indicate that we have been having some constructive conversations with counsel for the town of Ringgold, where this parcel is located, and just throw it to you.
So my first question would be, even though it's going back to the 70s, it is zoned as this landfill, but there's no requirements set forth in our code for this district, correct?
Our code does not talk about landfill at all. That is correct.
It's not effectively zoned, but is it zoned? Like, what is your consideration there?
It is, well, maybe Shad can better answer that than me since he decides
Shad,
what's zoned.
Yeah.
You're
I-
still sworn in, so go ahead.
Yep, so essentially the action that happened in 79 zoned that parcel into a district that just wasn't in our zoning code. It's just not defined in our zoning code.
Was it in our
So-
code back then?
No, it was a separate ordinance that,
Okay.
so it is effectively under the county zoning authority, it's just not under chapter 17.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. Other questions for staff? Okay. Seeing as I do have one person signed up on the public comment sheet, I think I am going to reopen the public hearing and we'll accept public testimony again. So, because I only had one person set up or signed up, I'm not going to go through the first in favor, second opposed, third as interested may appear. So we'll start with Jessica Telusty. If you want to approach the microphone to the back, please, and then state your name. I'll swear you in.
Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Telusty.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
Folks, I am a member of the zoning committee for the town of Ringgold. As was indicated, we oppose the zoning or rezoning of this to heavy industrial. I believe a letter was sent and is in your packets in that regard. Our town attorney has been communicating with Corporation Counsel to get this zoned in a different manner that would be more suitable and, if presented to the board and the zoning committee, most likely more acceptable. Since we haven't had the verbiage in front of us until today to review, I can't give any precise answer to that, but the proposed language is much more amicable from our perspective. One thing I would also like to point out, though, is the heavy industrial zoning. The application, as it stands now, is incorrect. I believe that there was some research done after the fact, correct me if I'm wrong, Corporation Counsel, that indicated there was not continuous use of that property by Fiber Recoveries, that they did terminate activity on that property for well over a year. So the continued use, I believe, was a justification for the heavy industrial rezoning is actually incorrect and needs to be clarified. So at this point, we would ask that the board not recommend zoning this heavy industrial and give the town as well as Corporation Counsel more time to work on an amicable solution here. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Telusty? Any questions? None? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing as I have nobody else signed up here, and I guess I'll just ask generally, anybody else wishing to speak on item 5A3? All right. Seeing hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing for 5A3. And I will just note for the record that we did receive letters from Matthew and Cheryl Byer. I think a copy was provided at everybody's seat here. That'll be in the record. We did receive a letter from the town of Ringgold, and we also received a letter from Ms. Telusty as well. So I think that is all that we had for that section. We can proceed into deliberation and have some more discussion about the avenues that our Corporation Counsel set forth for us. So I won't spend too much time repeating what Mike said, but the committee can either go forward with heavy industrial, or we can allow our staff to talk to the town of Ringgold some more and see if there is a way to form the special use district, which would take some more time because we have some public engagement processes to complete. So that wouldn't be something that could get considered in 1 month. That's going to take a little bit more time. I guess I would ask Corp Counsel a clarifying question, and maybe Dave as well, but we'll see if Mike can answer it first. But are are we under any timeline constrictions with Verity at the moment where we would have to have something in place for them to start with their gas processing operations?
So nothing from the county's perspective, because the parcel is under county zoning authority and it's currently zoned as landfill use, there aren't any additional permitting requirements on the county's end for them to begin. The zoning action would, in effect, make it clear what actually applies to this parcel moving forward. I don't believe there's a timeline issue. I haven't been made aware of one. The company, Verity, did request that myself and the zoning administrator, Mr. Harvey, provide them just an outline of the county's position on the current zoning of that parcel, which we did provide, but I'm not aware of any other timeline issues.
Okay. I guess my other comment would be that with the heavy industrial district and us operating under, I think it's 5969 for this process, while the town of Ringgold met and opposed the heavy industrial reclassification, that decision would not have any procedural bearing on this. You know, we can proceed under 5969 if we wanted to, although I think that we as elected officials, of course, want to listen to, you know, what's going on in our communities, right? I just wanted to add that for the discussion as well. So any thoughts, questions? Supervisor Crow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. This is more of a hypothetical. If we were to approve this zoning to a heavy industrial, what type of mechanisms would the public have to either approve or oppose what's being used on the land?
Mr. Chair, do you want me to?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Go ahead, Mike.
sure. Because this is a county-owned parcel, the authority that the public has is through the county board, because the county board approves what happens on this parcel. Right now, the county board has, through its lease with Verity, indicated this parcel is going to be used for the purposes outlined in that lease, which is the construction of the landfill gas processing facility. The county board would have to take a different action and say, okay, this parcel is going to be used for X, Y, and Z. So the public would have their input through the action of the county board.
Other thoughts? Supervisor Rayback?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering if we would do with the heavy industrial and put an amendment on that could only be used for the the more solid waste stuff, and for Verity. Would that be an option here?
Mike?
That's a good question. So if you zoned into heavy industrial is an existing zoning district under your code. That existing district allows as permitted uses things such as the Verity operation. Our lease agreement that the board has already approved addresses what Verity can do on this property. Verity can't go in there and decide to build a McDonald's on the property because we're leasing the property to them, and our lease doesn't give them the authority to do so. So I don't think we have the authority to say we're zoning this into heavy industrial with an asterisk on it, because that would require a separate amendment to the zoning code, which would have to go through a separate process. I think your options are zone into the heavy industrial district, or pursue that special use district with the specifications that we've been working through with the town. Does that answer your question? Is there anything I can do to better answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay.
So I do have a question for Dave. And if it's background information, Corp Counsel, and the hearing's concluded, it's a clarifying question. Do I have to swear in, or can I just ask Dave the question?
You can ask it.
Okay.
You can ask it.
Okay. So Dave, with the heavy industrial piece and the alternative being this more focused hypothetical district that could get created for this area, do you see any problems if that new alternative district might be more constricting than what Verity might want to do. Like, do you ever see a situation where Verity might be in a situation where they might want to expand the operation and that new alternative district wouldn't allow them to do so?
I believe, thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that with the landfill gas purchase agreement and the site lease, anything that they want to do different than what we've specified would have to go through Solid Waste Board. It would have to come through this Environmental Resources Committee, and then would ultimately have to be voted on by county boards. So this is a 20-year plus 2 consecutive 5-year extensions. So essentially a 30-year agreement that they have to do what we've agreed upon. Like Corporation Council said, they can't come in here and build McDonald's.
No more, no less.
No
right?
more, no less.
It's what's specified in that agreement.
Correct.
My concern with the alternative is that if it essentially duplicates the land use agreement, then, I don't know, my worry is that there's a situation where that might have to be, that district has to get amended at some point to be more in line with heavy industrial. And then we end up just, like I said, just duplicating things. That's my concern. I'm not necessarily 100% for one or the other. I'm just trying to figure out what's more practical. Because what was initially proposed was reclassify it as heavy industrial, right? That's like the first layer as far as regulation. The second layer is that land use agreement. And that's what really would bind Verity to what they can and can't do. Heavy industrial is kind of like what opens up the door for Verity. Other thoughts? Chair Gibbs?
Yeah, I think, when you actually look at it, the board took action to effectively limit Verity's ability to utilize that property for gas, renewable natural gas conversion. And we have that in a contract, and contractually they're obligated to abide by that for 30 years. If they want to change that, the board would have to take action, as stated here. So I think going out and creating another district that potentially is different, that has potentially one utilization in the county, to me creates another layer of bureaucracy that I'm not seeing the need for.
Well, I alluded to this last month, which is that if we create a special exception for one, we potentially could create special exception for others. Like, there has to be some uniformity, there has to be some finality in the zoning process, there has to be. Other thoughts? Supervisor Kroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was brought up at the last time we had this meeting about if Verity were to break the lease of 30 years if that ended prematurely, but there wasn't really a direct answer on what would happen after that. Maybe Corp Council can have your final thoughts on what would happen if that lease were to end early.
Well, because it's a hypothetical, I can't say for certain, but I think your question is if Verity were no longer operating on the site, let's say no Verity at all, then there wouldn't be a lease agreement. Then the county still owns the parcel. The county decides what happens on the parcel. So unless there's another public-private partnership that the county engages in a site lease agreement with that allows that to occur, and that would go through the county board, then the parcel is a vacant county property. It would depend on what the county board elected to use that parcel for. Or we could elect to run the landfill gas processing directly if that infrastructure is up and Verity no longer wants to operate it. I mean, it's hard to say what would happen, but those are options.
But any decisions like that where, let's say Verity would pull out for whatever reason, and Dave said, hey, we want to run that ourselves out at Solid Waste, that's going to have to go in front of the Solid Waste Board anyway. So there'll be an opportunity for folks to attend that Solid Waste Board meeting, contact their representatives outside of that meeting even, and provide their concerns to them. I think there's still avenues for the public to voice their concerns about this thing. Other thoughts? Any indication of where the committee?
Marilyn Bent, I have a comment.
Oh, go ahead, Marilyn.
I'm just concerned about where that they did that VidCon type stuff, which was different than what was in the agreement. Would they still be able to do that, or if you make the change, would that be disallowed?
I can probably answer that one. Yeah, so, and getting back to some of the town of Ringgold's original comments about them coming in and operating the data center. So that was a short-term temporary agreement, and the date specified on the contract is September 1st, 2025. So if they are not doing renewable natural gas by that date, then we would kick them out ourselves, and they would not be allowed back on site. So there was a clause in the original landfill gas purchase agreement that up until that date, they would be able to generate electricity with the old engines that are on site, and then put that electricity, either sell it or put it back on the grid. So that operation has since stopped, and they are full speed ahead on development of the renewable natural gas plant, and have completely shut down the Bitcoin operation.
So we're in the discussion part right now. We've concluded the part where we're accepting public testimony. This is the committee's time to discuss. All right. Other thoughts? Anybody like to make a motion, right? There's two avenues here. You can either explore the special or the creation of a special district or zone to heavy industrial. I think that for all practical purposes, punting for a month again isn't necessarily the best situation, because we really wouldn't be giving our staff anything additional to go out and research. If there was some interest in creating the special district, then I could see that. But really, it has to be one or the other here today. Supervisor Kroll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a clarifying question from the representative from Ringgold. They had noticed there was a potential error on the application. Does that hold any merit in this, like in this situation?
I can refer that to Mike, yeah.
So in my review of the application after that comment, I believe what Ms. Tlusty is referring to is a doctrine of a pre-existing use on the property. When I read the application, it talks about how this parcel has been consistently operated for landfill gas processing. That's been the historical use. I don't read the application as saying that there has been a consistent and not ceasing operation of one particular entity or another. So I don't think it's an error on the application or fatal. But again, I did draft the application myself, so I don't know if anyone disagrees on the staff side, but I don't think it's an error.
Fatal's a colorful word. Hey, I'm not the attorney, so. Okay. Any indication as far as where the committee's leaning right now? Supervisor Kroll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess for me personally, I'm leaning in favor of approving this change to heavy industrial. It seems that the residents of Ringgold are definitely not in favor of this. They have had their feedback. They are, there is potentially a precedent being set whether this would be the first zone to be zoned as HI. But I believe there's going to be ample avenues for if residents want to have some public feedback. If anything has to go and change inside of the agreements, they can provide their feedback to the county board or to the representative. So I think there's some layers of protection that will help this in the future.
Okay. Yeah, he doesn't have, you don't have to hold his feet to the fire there, Supervisor Drabek. He can, I'm trying to figure out where everybody's at right now. That is probably the biggest concern, as I've stated a couple times already, is that I really fear the idea of creating the exception And I know folks could probably make an argument that, this is county-owned land and it's under this 5969 statute, but I just have this sneaking suspicion that somebody might not get their way and think that they can just create a new district because we just did it for Ringgold, right? That's a risk. That is a very real risk. That is not something that the committee should ignore. I think the other thing is that the process itself has actually worked thus far. The residents had concerns about the Bitcoin mining. They contacted the county. They had discussions, and now the Bitcoin mining isn't proceeding out there, right? So like that part has played out very well. And that's operated within the system. We haven't had to create a special use district for that. There's also the risk, of course, that if there was a special use district that was proposed, there might be a situation where the town of Ringgold doesn't like that one because it might not be acceptable to them, and then we're right back where we started with heavy industrial, right? That's another risk. Supervisor Seefeld? Or are you itchy?
Trigger fingers itchy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we go with the heavy industrial today, what effect is that going to have with the town of Ringgold? I'm just asking that question. Is it, this is a parcel of how many acres? 3.5? Under 5. Okay. I'm just wondering why we have so much resistance to go to the heavy industrial when the county does own the land.
Well,
question.
Yeah, and I guess how about let's proceed with Supervisor Seefeld's question, and then I want to make another point. But I don't know if Shad or Garrett want to jump in there as far as what the process would look like if it went to heavy industrial, right? Explain that would go to the county board and then when it would be binding and in effect.
Yeah, so essentially, if you guys deem it to go to heavy industrial, it ends up going to the county board for final approval. So it's not actually rezoned into heavy industrial until county board approves it. Once that happens, then it's effectively rezoned into heavy industrial.
Okay. What land use restrictions beyond the land use agreement that Corporation Council alluded to, what are there right now? Because this landfill designation, it sounds like, has evaporated.
So the landfill designation that exists on the property right now effectively doesn't have really any standards associated with it other than it can only be used for landfill purposes. That's what from 79 says. So right now it's that statement plus the agreement that is in place. If it does go to heavy industrial, there are already standards developed in the heavy industrial districts. There's like certain uses are conditional use in there, which would be able to utilize the BOA Board of Adjustments, depending if anything in the future were to happen on there. Anything additional other than the RNG, for example, if the McDonald's was going to happen and the county board approved it, it would also likely have to go through BOA, in which the municipality in the area, Ringgold, would get an opportunity at that public hearing as well to provide input. So the heavy industrial district does have other safeguards in place already that are already in our code. It's already something that our zoning team is familiar with enforcing. So it just adds another layer of protection.
So, but going back to the original point, which is right now the only restriction is that land use agreement.
Correct.
And of course, all the other state laws and
correct. Yep.
applying common sense. Right?
As far as our department, yes.
Yeah. And then a follow-up to that would be, are you aware of any, and I don't expect you or Garrett to know every single zoning map in this county. I don't expect you to, but in chapter 17, are you aware of any examples where there's a one-off district that's in effect in a town?
So there actually is one. It
What's that? Oh, okay.
it is what's the specific name of that zoning district? The mobile housing district. It's basically for existing mobile home parks. There's only one mobile home park that's zoned as that particular district in the county. It is a special use district in our code. As to why that was put in place, I don't really have much history on that one. But there is effectively one parcel zoned in that district. I'm guessing it was something that was put in place when our code was developed in 2016, just to regarding mobile home parks.
Okay, so then, thank you. Dave, what is your landfill zoned at?
Landfill property?
Yeah.
The landfill property is zoned landfill from 1979.
So currently that's also effectively, I don't want to throw this term around like this, but that's effectively unzoned as well.
It's zoned, it's just not zoned in chapter 17.
Oh,
It's-
I'm sorry,
Yep.
yes, okay. Okay. Borough Council?
Could I throw it? I think Attorney Vanderwall, who represents solid waste, has something to add to the discussion. So
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to add one thing to the, two comments to the committee. Number one, whatever decision you make today is not going to be a static decision. I mean, as you know, you could zone it heavy industrial, the parcel heavy industrial this afternoon, and in a month or 2 or 3 months, direct staff to look at a special use district. I mean, there's nothing stopping you in the future from doing that should someone have a change of heart or the committee have a change of heart relative to creating a special use district. And to put your mind at ease, as some of you may know, I represent some municipalities, villages, and cities, and we, in those municipal corporations, are creating special use districts all the time, such as tax increment districts. We'll get into the issues related to it, but special use districts are created by other municipalities. And the idea of working into a special use district was our attempt, and I say our attempt, working with the county staff, attempt to ameliorate the concerns raised by the town of Ringgold relative to the heavy industrial. But it is zoned currently as solid waste. It has been zoned as solid waste, and the heavy industrial was staff's attempt, and I lump myself into that statement, to address the town of Ringgold's initial concerns, and when they still raised concerns, the special use district was again a further attempt. But whatever you do today doesn't mean it's the end of the story either. This is a legislative decision. So, thank you, by the way.
Well, the distinguishing,
Represents
that's the distinguishment between the two individuals here, which is that I have a member of the public, and then I have essentially someone who's advising staff. You're an extension of Dave in this case, right? Yeah. So that is an option that I was not aware about for this discussion today, as far as the county board could move to zone as heavy industrial and then still work to create a special use and continue to have discussions with Ringgold. Indeed. Or leave it as this, yes. Thank you. A lot of furrowed brows around this table. Any other thoughts, questions? I'll call again. Anybody like to make a motion? Supervisor Kroll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion for the landfill yet to be zoned to heavy industrial.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Drabek. Any further discussion? If you'll forgive me, I'm going to get a pen because I don't think this is going to be unanimous. All right, we're going to do a roll call vote. So the motion is to approve the heavy industrial zoning change. All right. So to be clear, before we vote, aye means you're approving of the heavy industrial change. Nay means you're voting against the change. All right. I want to be clear about that before we start voting. All right. Mr. Miller.
Nay.
Nay. Supervisor Schoenborn.
Nay.
Nay. Supervisor Kroll. Aye. Supervisor Drabek.
Aye.
Supervisor Seefeld.
Aye.
Supervisor Ritter.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Oh, Supervisor DeBrew, how do you vote?
No.
Motion carries 5-3. Because Marilyn Benn is not a voting member of this committee. Moving on to B, review and possible recommendations to County Board for its consideration. Town zoning changes pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 60.62 sub 3. We have none. 5, we are on 5C. Review and possible recommendations to County Board for its consideration. 1, Marathon County Assembly's Ordinance 1204, review of draft update and consideration of forwarding to the county board. So, more education, folks, for our new members in the room here. So, I'm just going to give you the 2-second summary, and then I'll, of course, hand this over to our CPZ staff, and I think Sheriff Billup also wanted to address.
If there's questions.
Yep, if there's questions. So I'll just give you a quick update as far as what this is. The county had a large assemblies ordinance on the books. It's sort of common sense, you know, what's it meant to regulate? It's meant to regulate large gatherings, right? So when I say large gatherings, you should be thinking of things, well, there's basically 2 in the county. There's the steam show over in the western side of the county, and then we, of course, have the Taste and Glow as well. Those are basically the only 2 that would get affected by this, although there's another wrinkle with that. With the steam show, we'll address that at some point. The county made the decision to regulate these events in the past, I think primarily due to health and safety concerns, public safety concerns, that people should feel comfortable and safe going to large events in this county, all right? Lo and behold, some time ago, a year and a half or so ago, our corporation council discovered that that ordinance that was on the books was unenforceable, right? So the county created a work group to look at revising that ordinance to make it enforceable, right? And those discussions have been ongoing for a long time now, primarily due to public engagement, reaching out to the steam show and the Taste and Glow to try and get their input with this potential ordinance change, okay? So I'm going to hand this over to staff, and they're going to talk about what that draft ordinance could potentially look like. And I think what might end up happening today, folks, not to bury the lead here, the work group is probably going to have to meet again. There was some new information that was presented, and I think that group's going to have to get back together and revise their draft. So doesn't have to be a decision here made here today. Just want to make you all aware of that before we get too far forward. Lori, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Longenhahn. I do believe you did help hurry this presentation along, which is great. You've given some of the background. So as you stated, it was Corporation Council's fault. They found. So we do have an ordinance on the books for regulating large assemblies. It was determined in 2022 that as it exists, it is unenforceable due to constitutional concerns, and it was placed on the administrator's work plan to look at updating this ordinance. So in 2023 and early 2024, a work group has met several times to discuss an update to this ordinance. We do have a current draft that is on the website and was in your packet. It's dated March 28th of 2024. The goal of the work group was to discuss whether or not Marathon County should regulate large assemblies and bring that back to the standing committees and county board for a decision, and also to analyze and create an enforceable ordinance if they determined that they were going to make that recommendation that we should regulate large assemblies. The work group did consist of members from the Environmental Resource Committee, Public Safety, and the Infrastructure Committee, along with several departments at Marathon County, and we also invited representatives from the STEAM Show and Taste and Glow to be a part of our conversations, because those are the two standing events that we know of in the county that would have this ordinance would apply if it were to be updated and adopted by the county board. So starting last summer in June of 2023, the work group organized. We did do a couple different outreach efforts to the towns and standing committees for comments. So in September of October 23, we went to the towns. We also presented at the Towns Association. And after we got initial input from the committees and towns, we did come back and make revisions from November through January. And then we brought it back to ERC, Public Safety, and Infrastructure in December, and we also made a presentation to the entire county board in 2024, and at that point the towns were also notified of additional opportunities to provide input. And then in March of 2024, we did meet with the work group again to make some final revisions in preparation to bring it back to you all this summer to see if we had a draft that we were ready to move forward to county board. I'm going to give you a high-level summary of some of the input we received, and then if I do miss any of the bigger points, I'll let Corporation Counsel, the Administrator, or Sheriff Billup also add what they remember of some of the input we've received, because we have gotten quite a bit over the last year. But most of the input surrounded what the purpose of the ordinance was, what the threshold and applicability of the ordinance would be. We talked a lot about security concerns. We talked a lot about implementation and appeals and how that would work. So how this ordinance would work in practice, and then if somebody didn't agree with us issuing a permit under this ordinance, what appeal process they would have. And we also talked a lot about fees. So the work group in drafting the ordinance came up with the purpose was to regulate the assembly of large numbers of individuals in excess of those who would normally be requiring health and sanitary and safety services of the county. We also discussed the purpose of the ordinance would be to regulate those large number of individuals to minimize adverse impacts to surrounding properties and uses. So every time one of these events happens, there are neighbors involved as well who do have an interest in making sure that there's some regulation in place to make sure that their land is not being adversely impacted by a large assembly. In the draft ordinance, the applicability, similar to what's on the books now, would be all unincorporated areas of Marathon County. That's regardless of their zoning status.
Unincorporated means for the new members, towns, right? Villages and cities are incorporated, towns are unincorporated. All right.
And so it does not matter if it would be county or town zoned or not zoned at all. If it is unincorporated, if this ordinance is adopted, it would apply to those areas. There was a lot of discussion about what the threshold should be. We ended up, the work group decided to put forth keeping it at 3,000. That is what is currently in the ordinance on the books, but we did add clarification as to when or how many over what time that 3,000 had to assemble. So the definition is 3,000 or more attendees at any one time or an aggregate over the course of 8 consecutive hours. So we just discussed a lot about at what number of people is there an impact that we want to make sure that we're regulating, because that impact is starting to affect health and safety and sanitary services, and it might also start to affect surrounding landowners. The draft ordinance includes exceptions for places of worship, stadiums, athletic fields, arenas, auditoriums, and coliseums, and it also if a business is allowed to operate under the zoning code that they have, so whether it's town or county zoned, if their zoning district allows for them to be a commercial business that does large assemblies, like say a wedding venue, this ordinance would not apply to them if they already have those necessary permits in the correct zoning district. We also have situations in our code where people, and in town codes, where they can apply for what's called a conditional use permit. That's actually what the STEAM show just recently completed in the last month. So they were able to come before our Board of Adjustment and get a conditional use permit for, I believe they were approved for 3 events a year. 3 events is what they applied for, and that was what they were approved for. 3 large assemblies a year. That actually means now that the STEAM show would no longer be subject to our large assemblies ordinance because they have achieved a conditional use permit to do that. So. Unless they go beyond the 3, I should say.
Yeah, which I want to give a little bit more background for, especially our new members. This committee, these departments don't wake up in the morning and try and dream up new ways to regulate people. That's not what we do here. I don't think any of us want to do that, right? The STEAM show was a wrinkle in this process because they have been not just good, but great people running this organization for a long time in this county. And we were trying to find a way to make sure that they didn't get wrapped up into this, because really, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the other members that were here last term, but one of the practical purposes of this ordinance is for, let's say that I want to use, my family owns a lot of farmland. Let's say that I want to have a big rock concert, country concert festival, whatever, on my or on our family's property, right? Let's just use that as an example, right? I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about running a large event, right? I don't know how many porta potties I need. I don't know what I need to do for food vendors and all that stuff. The idea was that this ordinance would be a signpost for those new events to look to, for them to do their event safely, okay? Another practical purpose, and I think Sheriff Billup mentioned this in one of our discussions many months ago, but Farm Technology Days is going to be here in a couple years. I think in 2025? 6, thank you. In 2026. If you're familiar with how that event is organized, it comes around, I think the last time was 10 years ago or something like that in Marathon County? 2011, yeah, thank you. So 13 years ago. Chances are the people that were involved in the organizing all the way back then aren't the ones that are going to be either around to do it now, or they might not be interested, right? So again, the idea was have some signposts available for folks, that way when they have this event, they know where they need to start. Okay? All right. Sorry, go ahead, Lori.
Okay. The other exception that's in the draft ordinance is just talking about fees that we would not apply to government-sponsored events held on government-owned property where the proceeds are returning to the government. So we did have quite a few conversations about security concerns and did put some provisions into the updated ordinance to address that. Again, like Chair Longenhan said, this ordinance is also for the events out there that we don't know about, and we want to make sure that if new events are coming into the county, that we are having some regulations around the security we expect them to have. So there is a basic provision in there that they will have security, three security persons per 1,000 attendees, and some minimal screening through the state to make sure those security people have been cleared. And I'll let Sheriff Billup speak more to that if you have questions, but we felt this was pretty important, again, for the events that are coming into the county that we don't know about, not the ones that are already, it's not for the good actors, it's also for the, the bad actors that could come to the county. We had a lot of discussion about implementation of the ordinance, just making sure, like, if we do have new events coming into the county, how are they going to navigate the ordinance? How are they going to know how to properly set up their events? So we have drafted quite a few resources and guides that would be available if this ordinance goes into effect, including a frequently asked question, example plans available to applicants who would need to create an application. So if one of the provisions in the ordinance is for an emergency response plan. So we have drafts available that they can then use to just sort of fill in and tell us a little bit about what kinds of emergencies they expect with their event and how they would respond. So for example, if a tornado was coming through the event, like making sure that they've thought through that process of what would happen if they got notification a tornado was coming. We also talked a lot about streamlining the process, so making sure that applicant doesn't have to go to 5 county departments if they're looking to have a large assembly in the county. So we talked about that they would all come through CPZ, and we would handle the distribution of that to the different departments and the review of that. And what we're working with, so the health department, as it relates to vendors and food, still has their own permits, but what we would do is we would work with the health department to, again, get the applicant so they could get all issued sort of at one-stop shop, but we'd work with the health department to do that. One of the suggestions that came out of the last work group was that we do need to evaluate this ordinance. So we need to be able to test it out and see how well it's working and make adjustments. So our suggestion would be to evaluate it after 5 events. There was some discussion about doing it after a year. But we might not even get an event in a year. It's hard to say. So we figured we should tie it to the number of events, and that we would want some data in terms of how, at least having 5 events to say how well did the ordinance work, what was too cumbersome, what worked well, what didn't work well. So issuance and appeals process right now, as the ordinance is written, the applicant, it must submit at least 40 business days prior to the event. In that timeline, CPZ, getting that coordination from the other departments, would have 30 business days in which to make a determination to issue the permit or deny it. And then that would allow another 10 business days for the appeals process. There was a lot of input from towns regarding they wanted that ability to have some say in the permit as well. So we did work with Corporation Counsel to determine that they could appeal the issuance of a permit, and so making sure that we're allowing for that. When Corporation Counsel did the analysis of the old ordinance, there was some discussion about how long we can have also to issue these permits, and we had to tie it to other processes, making sure that we're not being requiring too long of a period before we issue the permit. And I'm not explaining that well, so I'm going to let Corporation Counsel explain that. But there has to be a nexus, essentially, that we can't say they have to submit it 6 months in advance, because we don't really have anything that we can tie that to. So 40 business days is standard with many other practices we do at CPZ, so that is how we determined that. And we also talked about, as soon as, in practice, if this goes into effect, CPZ would notify the towns that would be affected once an application is submitted, so that they will know right away that one is being reviewed, and then if they choose to appeal our decision, they'll be ready to do that after the 30 business days is up. Right now in the draft ordinance, we did talk about fees and recovery as well. One of the other reasons the ordinance needed to be looked at was to make sure that we are recovering fees for our county services that are often being provided to these large events. So we do have in there that there would be an application fee, and right now as it's written, we talk about extraordinary services are also covered. So if somebody is looking for extraordinary services to support their event, they would be required to work with that department. It could be the sheriff, it could be highways, to have a contract to provide those services. And I know this is one of the new pieces of information that came forward in the last week or so, where we might want to take it back to the work group. I believe Sheriff Billup has some additional ideas about considering some other ways we might want to look at recovering fees for the amount of time our county staff is spending staffing these events. So, do you want to take it over? Or
So what came up recently, and I'll go back just a little bit, when we were first looking at this ordinance, I was asked to reach out to the other sheriffs across the state and see what they have for ordinances. So the ask was, if you have an assemblies ordinance, would you please share it with me? I received 3. I think they were Columbia County, Oneida County, and Chippewa County. Well, I happened to be at a conference this last week with the sheriff from Walworth County, and he was talking about Alpine Valley and the Jason Aldean concert that's coming and all that happens down there. And I'm like, how do you guys manage that? How do you staff it? And he said he's bringing in staff from counties all around him. I'm like, well, how do you recoup costs? How does it all work? And what they do in Walworth County is, through their ordinance, they require the event organizer to charge a fee on top of what they charge for tickets. So if there's an entry fee to get in, and it's $5. Their fee right now is $1.90. It's going to go up to $2.20. But I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm just using that as an example. But if it's $5, you ask for $6. And then that $1 would be given back to the county in order to take care of those extraordinary services. So you're not worrying about this billing that happens back and forth where we say, well, we had 5 people this day and 6 people this day, and Jim Griesbach and the highway department came out and did this, and the health department did this, and CPZ did that. It would all just come back to one location, and then those departments would be taken care of within it. So it's an idea, and it's that idea that I wanted to bring back to the committee to discuss in order to have a discussion around that. So.
Yeah, thank you, Sheriff Billup. The other thing that I wanted to mention in this group is that there have been 3 standing committees involved in these discussions. There's been the ERC, Infrastructure, and Public Safety. Thank you. So we're not the only ones looking at this, and that's also in addition to the work group. I will say, and the committee has heard me say this in the past, but I think the ERC has probably done the best job at vetting the ordinance thus far. We've ran into some situations in the past, and luckily I think the ERC took the initiative to address some of those things. So, Lori, you had some more things? Right?
I think we're at next steps, so
Okay.
it is, it's up to this committee on what they would like to do next with this ordinance. It will be going to Public Safety and Infrastructure as well for an educational presentation in July to both those committees, so.
Okay, so questions from the committee, and then I would like, this is an actionable item, right?
Correct, it
Should
is
be.
still listed as an
Yep,
actionable item.
Yep. I would like, at least I feel that there should be a motion to refer it back to the work group. But I wanted to give everybody an opportunity to ask staff questions about this. So are there any questions for staff? Tom?
Just curious, how does this affect the Marathon County Dairy Breakfast?
I think we discussed that there might be some dairy breakfasts that would achieve that number, but we haven't, I don't know that we've confirmed that any of them have done that at this point, so.
Given that, and that's good, I like having discussions like this, for because if we're going to do something like this, we got to talk to the community, right? So one thing I would add, if this does get brought back to the work group, hopefully the work group will reach out to those, mainly FFA associations that put those on, right?
That would be the Marathon County Dairy Breakfast is the big one. Yeah,
Got it. But I would ask that the work group would reach out to these groups and ask them about that, because I don't want to repeat history to give you, what happened 8 months ago was we were all sitting at these tables and the ordinance was in front of us to approve until somebody, I think it was either Rick or Al, said, what about the steam show? And then I think at the time Supervisor Overbeck said, well, what about the Taste and Glow? And then we found out the work group had not done any outreach. That's got to be done before we vote on anything. Has to be done. So if this goes back to the work group, Lori, if you could please make a note to reach out to those folks.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Supervisor Seefeld.
For the Marathon County Dairy Breakfast, this year they served 2,300 people this year. Brian said it was down since the last time he had it, but in previous years, I'm not sure if they ever met the 3,000 limit. I'm not sure, but
I still think that's an opportunity for the work group to ask those questions to that group, though, right? Yeah. But thank you, though, Supervisor Seefeld. That's good background. Although, like you said, though, have they ever even gotten close, right? That's important. Okay. Other questions, comments? Supervisor Drabeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Say, is there the fees, like a schedule of fees or whatever? Do we know how much this is going to cost to do for them? Did I
For
miss
the
that one?
application,
Yeah, did I miss that part or?
we had suggested $500, but right now it lives in 12.01 and it's done by size. We were suggesting a flat fee regardless, but that would be a decision that the county board would need to make as well, so.
Did the committee make that, or the work group make that determination, or how is that 500?
I know we brought it forth at the March meeting, and I don't think there were any objections, but we were just trying to tie a reasonable amount of hours and review is what we are only trying to recover.
So
our
actually, now that you're saying that, Lori, that recommendation actually never came from the work group then, because it never would have gotten out of that committee yet, because we didn't talk about it in April, right?
I don't understand.
I'm sorry, so they talked in March, right? They talked
Yes.
about the 500?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that was incorporated in their discussions, but as far as a draft that was sent to us, we've never seen that yet, right?
It's
That was
not
just
written in 12.04 anywhere.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
no, because I
mean
think
to
that's a.
I didn't mean to confuse
Administrator
anybody.
Leonard-
My point was that recommendation never came up to us yet.
I believe the dollar amount was discussed at the work group.
Yes.
Your current ordinance, as Lori referenced, that was last approved by the board, it looks like some time ago, but is a tiered system with the lowest threshold being $500, the $3,000 to $9,999. It's a 4-tiered approach that ratchets up from $500 to $800 to $1,200 to $1,500. So the recommendation is to flatten that tiered approach because functionally there's not much, oversimplify, but there's not much difference in terms of review from the staff perspective. If your event's got 3,500 people, you still need to think about the same things that Chair Lanigan referenced, the porta potties, water, garbage, parking, emergency planning, security. Certainly, the requirements might change if you have 50,000 people versus 3,500, but the idea that as a planning tool, as you referenced, Chair Langenhan, that review doesn't change in that respect. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Right, and it's not written in the 12.04 draft because it currently the fee lives in 12.01. So I think there's a process that has to be figured out for how we.
When we do bring back, when there's a formal request for action, essentially, as Lori referenced, this, not to really get in the weeds on the review, but actually this predates me as the administration when the county board directed us to look at this. It was 2018, I think 2018 or 2019 for sure, when public safety and infrastructure started the conversation about, hey, we need to come up with an ordinance because we're having all these events, the Wausau Marathon, these triathlon events that are going to be transcending one community. They're going to be going through multiple communities. And this idea was, let's create an ordinance. Well, I remember sitting in one of those meetings with Chad, and 12.04 already exists. So that said, that started us down the process of what should it look like. And of course, the pandemic got in the way, and I don't want to belabor that. But the idea of really addressing some of those underlying concerns with applicability, using it as a planning tool, and then, one of the concerns also being that fee and recovery piece that the sheriff just referenced. It's much more conducive for us, for the county, whether it's the sheriff's office or any of our other departments, to be engaged early on a large event when we might be asked to provide security services or traffic control than it is to say, hey, I'm having an event next week and I'm hoping you guys can be out.
This just happened.
Yeah, so that's kind of the underlying reason for that review that's been many years in the making. But getting back to what ultimately the action that the county board will need to take up if you do desire to make a change, it's really not just to 12.04. It's also to 12.01. To your point, Chair Langenhan, you would strike the tiered fee schedule approach within 12.01 sub 2 and either add language within 12.04 to clarify what the cost structure is or leave it in 12.01 sub 2.
And there might be a situation where, and I will be, perfectly honest with this committee, I have not heard of any indication from the community that there's going to be tons of marathons and concerts and that popping up all over the countryside, right? That's just, that's just not what reality is showing us. But if there was a situation where we discovered that that flat fee wasn't working anymore, ordinances aren't like Moses coming down from the mountain where he's got the 2 tablets and that's it. They're set in stone forever. That's not how ordinances work. They can be adjusted. They can be amended to better fit the community, right? So I just want to make that point. Chair Gibbs, you got a point.
I guess, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two questions come to my mind. Sheriff Bill, when you talked about these other communities going to a fee per participant or add on to the ticket cost, is there any requirement that they tie that to the amount of services and the cost of services that are being provided?
No. I think at that point, it becomes a discretion of the law enforcement resource there. In my case, I would delegate that to someone, but they would determine the appropriate level of service. What Walworth County, as an example, says in their ordinance is, if the cost of providing the service is greater than what they collect in the fees at the end of the year, the sheriff should bill that group for the difference in what it would cost. What I can tell you is oftentimes organizers don't know what they need. We've had that happen to us twice in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, where we were told, hey, we're having these events and we need you for A, B, C, and D. And we're like, we can't be there. We just don't have what you need. And we haven't even broached them paying us for services because we couldn't provide it. And then we have to worry about our due diligence, and we know we've got a large crowd of people, and there should be somebody there. We should have resources there. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. The other thing that, in discussion of the ordinance itself, was I understand the fee for the application to go through the process through the various departments, but if there's a heavy request for highway department to close a whole section of road, or sheriff's department to have 20 squads, is that fee separate from the application fee?
So Sheriff Billup, that's fine, or whoever wants to respond to that, but Chair Gibbs, I don't mean to wag the finger at you. Those type of discussions should happen at the work group. I don't want them to happen up here. Yep.
I'll take it. That's that slide that Lori had that said extraordinary services. That is the idea there, that if there is a request, because again, this ordinance is not a fee recovery tool. It's really a planning tool to make sure that events are held in a safe way. If there is a request, again, we want to know that as early as practicable. And then we would essentially have a contract for services. If we can meet the need, like the sheriff just referenced, we would say this is what our cost to deliver these services would be, outline that in that contract and pursue it through that separate document. Is that fair to say, Mike? And
okay, Supervisor Schoenborn.
My one question that I caught was, what was your rate, up to 3,000 people? How many patrol people? I'm just saying, I've been out at Balloon Fest or whatever, and I know it's a large area to cover. I'm not saying, that you never know when things are going to happen and get out of line. But if they're stationed, one at the bottom when you come in and one at the top and then one way over on the far end, I'm just saying, how a group of 3,000 people will get real quick. Has that been taken into consideration? I'm just looking at it because, we want to hold a safe festivity, and it's a lot of area, a lot of people to manage. And how control, it could get
ugly. It can depend on the event, right?
Yeah.
To to Supervisor Langenhahn's point, if you have a rock concert where they're serving alcohol and you know those things are taking place, that's very different. We've worked with Farm Tech Days before. I actually worked at length with them. The way you would staff Farm Tech Days and how it's laid out is different from how you do those two. If we were going to do it, we would probably do it at a ratio on an average event of 2 deputies per 1,000 people.
Okay.
So that's what, if I remember right, that's what Homeland Security recommends in their large event planning. But that's the whole point to the administrator. What he had to say is, the whole point in this is to have a plan for an event, right down to how many porta potties should you have at the events. You don't have people out in the parking lot next to somebody's car doing things they shouldn't be doing next to somebody's car, right? So having the health department involved, it's all of those things. And I can show you a plan from Farm Technology Days in 2011. Those folks got it down. So when it comes to severe weather and what's the plan and what's the evacuation routes, what do you do for a lost child? Those are the things that we want to work through with these groups so that we have plans for them and that we have staff there to deal with it when those happen. The Balloon Fest, our biggest call for service, we have it multiple times, is missing children. They get separated from parents, and that will be our largest call, not this weekend, next weekend at the Balloon Fest.
Thank you.
Well, given the sheriff's comments, I guess I have to disclose that I am going to Rockfest this year, but. All right, any other comments, questions? Okay. Supervisor Drayback.
Jake, Marilyn Bend, I have a comment.
So Marilyn, I saw Supervisor Drayback first, then we'll go to you, okay? So Supervisor Drayback's going to ask a question, then we'll go to you. Okay, thanks. Al, go ahead.
Thank you.
I was just going to make a motion to send it back to the work group, but,
That's fine if you make the motion, and we'll get to Marilyn's question.
all right, anyway, that's yeah.
Okay, so you're making the motion to send it back to the work group?
I think
Supervisor
that's a
Drayback?
good idea to do that, yeah.
Okay, so you're making the motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Make a motion.
Motion by Supervisor Drayback, is there a second? Second by Supervisor Schoenborn. Any further discussion? Okay, Marilyn, you had a question.
How many people are on the workforce committee and what is their background?
I think Lori can answer that.
The work group, so there's 1 to 2 representatives each from public safety, ERC, and infrastructure. There's probably 1 to 2 representatives each from CPZ, health department, sheriff's office, parks, corporation council, highway. Did I miss any department? Emergency management, and administrator. And then show has regularly attended since probably late last fall. Yeah. So
That answers my question. Thank you. Thank you.
Our person that sits on the work group, I believe, is Supervisor Seefeld, right? Rick, that's you? And Al, yeah.
show up once in a while.
Yeah. But those are open working meetings like we've had. I haven't seen it myself, but I know that Steam Show has shown up to them in the past too. So, yeah.
Chair Longenhan, for
Yes.
the motion, is there any additional guidance on what you want the work group to work on besides relooking at the fees? Was there anything else?
I would just echo what Mr. Miller had mentioned earlier. That please talk to those groups that would be involved in the organization of the dairy breakfast, just to make sure that there isn't a risk that they potentially get wrapped up into that 3,000. I think that was incorporated into the discussions. Supervisor Drayback, is that reflective of your motion? Okay. All right. And who seconded that? That's okay, Jay? Okay, thank you. All right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay.
Not to throw any wrenches into anything, but throwing wrenches. This work group is not a formally constituted subunit of the county board or any body, so referring something to
Is it
this work
open?
group
Okay,
is probably not I mean, you don't have to do it.
Well, that's fair. So it's not an open meeting in the sense that we have a governmental body that's meeting right now because we're the ERC. But I would just say if there was somebody from the Steam Show, if there was somebody from the Taste and Glow, PPA was the group there, they could come to those sessions.
And
I
we do
guess
post them publicly.
Yeah, I would just recommend that they contact our staff to let them know they would be attending, right? So, is that okay, Mike? Lance?
Yeah, I think we understand the direction that we'll proceed with the educational presentations to public safety and infrastructure, but we'll make very clear that the direction we got here was to reconstitute the work group, get the band back together, talk through a couple of things, and then bring those forward with also the understanding that reaching out to PPA.
And the fees.
And the fees. Yep.
Okay. All right, I think we're all on the same page then. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. We are on to 6A1, 2024 first quarter financial reports, budget to actual for departments of jurisdiction. I think we have the administrator for that, right? Or Lori?
Sure, I can kick it off. You've had some long agendas, long meetings the last couple of months. You are a very diligent committee. This was a request from the county board that has been on my work plan, and it was really envisioned as part of our workday project that we really want to be able to provide each of the standing committees with quarterly financials. And we did that to a number of other standing committees. This item has just been postponed, I believe, a couple of times. We've had this conversation. First, we started with the HR Finance and Property Committee. These are your first quarter financials for the departments that are underneath your jurisdiction. We presented all of the department financials to HR Finance, again, to provide that information. I'll give you my takeaways, and they are, I think, reinforced by what you'll see in your committees. But as we got through first quarter, we're seeing what you'd expect to see. All of our departments came in somewhere between that, 18 to 30% of budget expenditure level, because we're a quarter through the year. And you can see from your committees, you're in that general area. The reason for that, you might ask, well, why is one committee one department at 18% and another might be at 28? The explanation is that, well, some of our revenues come in early in the year, some come in throughout the year, and some come in late in the year, depending on whether it's a grant, a state aid, or revenue from us delivering a service. The same thing is true for expenses. I have a number of contracts, for example, within the county administration department, that those contracts are signed January, and in many instances, we receive an invoice very promptly, and we cut those checks. So I'm 88% through one of my line items, and somebody else might be 10% through. So again, from a high-level perspective, I'm very happy to be sharing this information with you. You're kind of late. You're certainly through the first quarter. You're actually wrapping up your second quarter. So in the very near future, you're going to get another one of these reports that give you, I think, a better idea of where you are budget to actual through the year, because we'll be further through the year. But we're happy to answer any specific questions if you have them about hey, is this surprising, or help us understand what a particular a reason why you might see those different percentages. But when we had this conversation at HR Finance, I know Chair Gibbs was part of that conversation. I don't think there were any real pressing takeaways. There's one area, and you'll see it on what's on the screen, employee benefits. Man, we have 340% of budget. It's a very small dollar amount. The projected original budget was $1,393 for, it looks like, conservation, planning, and zoning. And we have spent out of that account more than 3 times. It's a small dollar amount. It was a mapping error, which we anticipated we would have some of those. Christy explained that well at HR Finance, so I'm not going to do it justice here. But the short answer is we'll have a better understanding of how to map those costs next year in the budget. But overall, we're where we expected to be. And I'd certainly welcome Lori, Jamie, or Dave, if there are certain things they want to highlight in their budget reports, to give them the opportunity to do it. But really, you see that, when you look at the lion's share of our budget for all of our departments are personnel. And when we're a quarter through the year and we're at 22% in one department and 21% in another, that's consistent with what we saw in other departments.
Yeah, I don't know if Lori or Dave or Jamie want to highlight anything, but, or if the committee has any questions. All right. No, this is good. I mean, this is something the county board talked a lot about last term as far as increasing transparency with the financials. So this is good to see. So I want to speak on behalf of everybody here, but we certainly appreciate the information. So, all right. Yeah. No action for this, right? I mean, it's not an actionable item, so I think we're good to go.
I think you are good. Thank you. I apologize for the anticlimactic presentation.
No, we like quiet. All right. Quiet is good. 6A2, comprehensive plan update to incorporate updated farmland preservation plan 2024-2033. Lori?
Okay, I will make this quick because this is the same thing that was actually in your county board packet. So you have, indeed, the county board has passed the updated farmland preservation plan. So the next step required by the state to ensure the future of our farmland preservation program is to amend our comprehensive plan with about, I think I came up with 21. I think I said 9 at county board. I think it's actually 21 when you count the cover page and page numbers, but 21 edits that need to be amended in our current comprehensive plan in order to update it for the state and keep our farmland preservation program in place. So right now I'm just sharing those edits with you. You can take a look at them on our comp plan online. The way this process will work is we will start notifications this summer to all the appropriate jurisdictions, towns surrounding and adjacent counties and entities that we need to notify by statute to let them know that we are going to be amending our comprehensive plan and giving them that opportunity to give any feedback to that. And then this fall, we would bring it back to the ERC and county board for approval. The other thing that's going to happen very soon is we are actually going to start the bigger comprehensive plan update. So it will be different than this amendment. It will be that bigger look at our comprehensive plan in terms of goals and objectives. Chair Gibbs has invited us to come to the executive committee on July 18th to talk a little bit more about that as well in terms of what that'll look like for timeline and process. That's going to be the bigger update to the comprehensive plan, not to be confused with this smaller amendment that needs to take place to just finish the adoption of our farmland preservation plan and keep our program in place for 2025.
Yeah, I know there was some discussion at county board last month regarding making some changes to the comprehensive plan. In my opinion, this would not be the place to have those discussions. That would be at those larger discussions that are going to take place very shortly with the bigger updates. So this right now is just looking at what needs to be changed for the farmland pres plan for the comp plan. I just want to make that clear to folks. Not an actionable item here, but any questions for staff? All right. Thank you, Lori. Moving on to 7A, discussion regarding 2025 annual budget development and policy recommendations from the committee, including review of the mandatory/discretionary program document, discussion of rates and fees. I'll give you all a little bit of background on this before I think Lori will give her presentation here. But starting, I think, last year was the first year, there was an initiative taken by the overall board to have more focused discussions at the standing committee level regarding the budgets of the departments that standing committee oversees. ERC had a lot of discussion last summer and into the fall regarding the finances of the departments. The document that you'll see in front of you, and it was included in your packet, is essentially a comprehensive list of programs that the departments offer and an indication of whether or not that service that's provided is mandated or not mandated, right? So if we're looking to make sure that we're being responsible financial stewards of the taxpayers' money, obviously one of the things that we're going to look at is what are we required to provide? Where is that requirement coming from? In this case, you'll see in the far right column, state statutes. And if it's not required, well, then we can have some more discussions about, do we offer the service? At what level do we offer that service? And like I said, the ERC had a lot of discussions last year regarding the programming. So I would say that one thing that I do want to at least have some discussion on at the July 16th meeting is maybe discuss this again. Doesn't have to be in a lot of fine detail, but if we want to, it can. And sort of give you all a overview of what all these departments do, right? You want to know what the departments do. This isn't a great way to really demonstrate in real life, but on paper, this is what our departments do. Yeah. Lori, what do you got?
I guess I'll just add a few things, and then if Jamie or Dave want to add something, or Administrator Leonard, I think, for conservation, planning, and zoning, you'll see in the mandated column, we have a mix of yes and no. We've discussed a lot in previous conversations, maybe with this committee or even internally. It's sometimes not as easy as just saying yes or no, because even if it does say no, often there is an ordinance that the county has chosen to adopt because they have the authority to do so. So with an ordinance in place, we do require services and staff to administer that ordinance. I think, as we said when we gave you the introduction to CPZ at our first ERC meeting for this session, CPZ is fortunate to have several state statutes that we get to oversee. So you will see quite a few services in our department that we do provide. We also have some services that, it might say no next to it, but in order to continue to receive funding that we are receiving towards our budget, we do need to have things like a land information officer and things like that. So you want to add?
Yeah, I think that's a great segue. So Chair Langenhan really laid it out well. This all stemmed from our work last year to get as part of our budget revisioning that we did, that we put together a couple of documents, and I borrowed this from a colleague of mine, and we, of course, added the information Lori just referenced, but it really does help get at some of the conversations that Chair Langenhan referenced. As a policy board, the county board and each of its subordinate committees, I think there are a couple questions through the budget that really can help frame what those policy decisions are that the county board has to make. And the first is exactly what Chair Langenhan said. What programs and services do we offer? Now, think back to your initial orientation meeting. You've heard us say this a number of times. We're very frequently an arm of the state. Counties are an arm of the state. We are tasked by the state to perform certain activities. And as Chair Langenhan referenced, that's this mandatory discretionary program document. It's at that high level to help you better understand the programs and services that we offer and why do we offer them. A number of them are that idea of, hey, the state is saying you need to act in this area. But as Lori said, sometimes it's more nuanced, which leads us into that next policy question, which also Chair Langenhan referenced, which is, at what level do you want to deliver those services? It's very often the case that the state says, hey, you need to have X program, or you need to deliver X service. They don't always turn around then and very expressly or explicitly tell us what that has to look like. That oftentimes is left to the county board. So what does level of service mean from a policy question standpoint? This committee actually was our, I think Chair Langenhan referred to it last year as the pioneer as we started the pioneering committee as we started these conversations, and that's true. But what does level of service mean? Well, I think it can mean it can take a couple of different looks. The first is you can have programs that are targeted in terms of the population that we serve, right? And you'll see that from some of whether it's the parks programs or certainly a lot of the programs at CPZ. When we're talking about a nutrient management plan, I don't farm, so I'm not accessing that service. God bless the farmers for doing that. So we can have what level of service being, well, who are we really targeting with this program? It can also be a quality measure. What level of service? The easiest one for me that I used last year is think about the quality of service, the level of service we're looking for within our highway system. We talk about a pavement rating, a PACER rating. What's our target? The county board sets a target. You have set a target of maintaining an average PACER rating of 7. It's a perfect example of how you can set a policy to get at what level of service. And then the last one, which you'll hear, I'm sure, from CPZ throughout some of these discussions, is a timeliness standard. You know, how long do we want it to take for us to review a permit in conservation planning and zoning? You know, you can set, even in a mandated service area, you get flexibility of how quickly do you have the expectation that our residents are going to have their permits reviewed and acted upon. So that's that second question of what does the level of service look like? And the last one is at what cost? So there's those three questions. What programs or services do we deliver? At what level? And at what cost? And if you look in the annual budget document, you'll see a fees for service schedule, which we tried to, again, provide additional information to the county board last year, and we're doing it again this year, to help understand, you know, some of our services are kind of a mutual beneficial thing. Like if you think about a POUT system, for example, personal on-site wastewater treatment system, certainly having fees and services with respect to inspection makes sense. That landowner is getting a direct service for them. But there's also the idea that perhaps there's a broader public good. So the discussion of what does that fee for service mix look like is certainly also a policy question that ultimately rests with the board. So those were the ideas that we discussed, as Chair Langenhan referenced, at each of the standing committees, and you don't need to get into the weeds today. But that last part about fees for service, I'll also say it lends itself well to one final point that was made in the budget orientation by HR Finance and Property Committee Chair Robinson, this idea that not every dollar in the county budget is the same, can stem from that at what cost section. So just as an example, these are departments not under this committee, but if you think about social services, for example, their budget, and I'm going to be accurate but not precise, let's just say it's about ballpark $20 million. But a third of that is tax levy. The rest is other revenues we get from grants, state aids, and other reimbursements. You contrast that, and I'm not picking on the sheriff's office because Chad is here, but their total budget is ballpark number here. Let's just say it's about $27 million. At least it was last year in that area. The vast majority, 90+%, is tax levy. That's not because our sheriff's office isn't pursuing grants and other things. There are some things that are tax levy heavy, and there are some things that aren't. You also have solid waste and parks in the back. Dave, he'll tell you, I'm sure, multiple times, no tax levy going into the landfill. Brian Griefey is very adept at saying that about Central Wisconsin Airport as well. So again, it's that idea of not every dollar in the budget is created equal. So if you want to affect a change, please engage staff early. Reach out to me, reach out to the corp counselor, the finance director, and we'll have a conversation to try to help you with that. But all of this effort, Chair Langenhan teed it up perfectly, is to help the standing committees and the full board have a more direct opportunity to impact the development of the budget earlier in the process. So we're not going to go through ad nauseum and what does the County Forest Administration and Management program look like within Parks, Rec, and Forestry. But if there is a program you want to have additional information about and further discussion, as Chair Langenhan referenced at a future meeting, please just let us know and we'll try to get that information for you. But that's, again, just that background on why are we here and why are we presenting you with a 50-page document, and also telling you to consult the 130-plus page annual budget with the fee for service schedule. It's that idea to address those three policy questions.
So that makes sense for folks here. So if you have any questions today, feel free to throw them out there. Otherwise, this isn't going away. There'll be more discussions over the next couple months as we get closer to September. So any questions here? Otherwise, this is going to keep popping up on the agenda. Okay. Marilyn, Randy, did you have any questions? All right.
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Sounds good. We'll see this again next month and definitely a little bit at our meeting on July 16th. So 8, next meeting, July 30th, 2024, 3 p.m., Assembly Room, future agenda items. Committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. B, announcements, requests, correspondence. 1, special ERC meeting for educational topics will be on July 16th. There will be no action taken at that meeting. Staff are going to take care of noticing all that. Do we have a time and location for that?
I believe we're doing 8:30 here at the Assembly Room. So 8:30 a.m. at the
Okay,
Assembly Room.
8:30 a.m. About how long do you think that's going to take?
Till about noon.
Till about noon? Okay. All right, 8:30 to noon. I'll see y'all there. Okay. I've got nothing else. Staff have anything else? No? All right. Number 9. What's that? Motion by Seefeld, second by Ritter to adjourn. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion, opposed? Motion carries. Oh, happy 4th, everybody. That's what I forgot. Happy 4th of July. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, staff. Thank you, committee members.
This meeting is no longer being recorded.
Know your hate on?
I buy my hay.
Oh, you buy it?
I graze everything.
Okay.
I just, it's, work full time and everything. Hit that window where you can get some. I used to have my